An abusive cop breaks a 9-year-old girl's arm, thinking no one will care. But her one emergency call wasn't to 911. It was to her father, Steven Seagal. And he heard everything. Live. The quiet afternoon sun of Oak Harbor cast long, peaceful shadows as 9-year-old Ayla Seagal walked home from her community art class, a sketchbook tucked under one arm. She was a gentle, observant child, her father's daughter in her quiet composure and the striking intensity of her dark eyes. 2 blocks from home, a police cruiser, Unit 73D, slowed beside her. Officer Mason leaned out, his sunglasses failing to hide the impatient contempt in his gaze. "You lost, kid," he barked, his tone accusatory. Ayla stopped, unintimidated but polite. "No, sir. I live right down the street." "Where are your parents?" "You got ID?" he demanded, stepping out of the car, his presence immediately aggressive. "I'm 9, she answered, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "My dad is waiting for me at home." "Don't get smart with me," Mason snapped, his temper flaring at her calm response. He suddenly grabbed her small wrist. Ayla froze, a gasp escaping her lips. "Let go, please. I didn't do anything." The sketchbook fell, scattering drawings across the sidewalk. As she instinctively tried to pull away from his bruising grip, Mason's face twisted into a cruel snarl. He yanked her small arm violently behind her back. A sickening, sharp crack echoed in the quiet street. Ayla screamed, a raw cry of agony as she collapsed, her arm bent at an unnatural angle. But in that moment of terror, her small thumb pressed and held a speed dial key on her phone, an emergency shortcut her father had taught her. The call connected instantly. At his home studio across town, Steven Seagal answered, and his world stopped as he heard his daughter's scream, the officer's growl, and the unmistakable sound of her bone breaking, all in real time. The phone line was a direct feed of raw agony. Seagal stood motionless in his quiet home studio, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to his daughter's desperate sobs and Officer Mason's callous muttering. Every sound was a hammer blow to his soul. The world around him, the polished wood of the dojo floor, the rows of antique weapons on the wall, faded into an indistinct blur. All that existed was the sound of his child's pain. It was a rage unlike any he had known. Not the explosive fury of his on-screen personas, but something far colder, deeper, and infinitely more dangerous. It was the primal rage of a father whose cub had been savaged. He didn't smash anything. He didn't roar. He simply closed his eyes for a single, terrifying second, his entire being focusing into a single point of cold, diamond-hard resolve. He heard Mason tell Ayla, "That's what you get for not listening," before the call was abruptly ended, likely by the phone falling from Ayla's hand. He knew from the sound of a car door that the officer had abandoned her. He was already moving, grabbing his keys, his phone, his mind a whirlwind of calculated fury. He made one call to his chief of security. "Track my daughter's phone. Now. And get me everything on Oak Harbor Patrol Unit 73D, Officer Mason." He was in his car in under a minute, the engine roaring to life. As he sped towards the hospital, the city light streaking past, he wasn't just a father. He was a force of nature, a storm of retribution gathering speed, aimed directly at the heart of a man who had made the last mistake of his career. After ensuring Ayla was stabilized at Oak Harbor General, her broken arm set in a temporary cast, Seagal's fury had settled into a chillingly calm resolve. The hospital staff, seeing the silent, imposing figure by the young girl's bed, gave him a wide berth. A quick call to a trusted contact in law enforcement had yielded Mason's current location with astonishing speed. The officer, having callously abandoned a child on the sidewalk, was now enjoying his usual Sunday dinner at a greasy spoon called the Iron Skillet Diner. Seagal walked into the diner like a phantom. The bell above the door barely chimed. He spotted Mason immediately, sitting in a booth, laughing at something on his phone, barking at a waitress. The casual normalcy of the scene was a grotesque insult. Seagal approached the table, his large frame blocking the light. Mason looked up, irritated. "Can I help you?" Seagal didn't answer. He simply took out his phone, his movements deliberate. He tapped the screen. From the phone speaker, the audio from Ayla's emergency call filled the suddenly quiet diner. First, Mason's aggressive bark, "You lost, kid." Then, Ayla's polite, small voice. Then Mason's escalating anger, Ayla's frightened pleas, and finally, the sickeningly clear crack of her bone breaking, followed by her scream of agony. Every patron in the diner froze, forks halfway to their mouths. The waitress dropped a plate. Mason's smirk vanished, his face draining of all color. Where did you get that?" he stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "You broke a child's arm," Seagal stated, his voice a low, flat rumble that carried more menace than any shout. "And then you left her on the sidewalk like garbage." She resisted." Mason blustered, trying to find his footing. "Did she?" Seagal asked, leaning forward slightly, his shadow falling over the table. "You're going to get a chance to explain that. To me. To my lawyers. And to a jury." He slid a napkin across the table. On it, he'd written Ayla's name and her room number at the hospital. "You terrorized the wrong little girl, Officer Mason. And you did it while I was listening." Before the night was over, the diner confrontation, filmed by at least 3 different patrons, had hit social media. It was a compelling, chilling piece of citizen journalism, the sound of a child's pain, the visual of a uniformed officer's panic, and the looming, implacable presence of Steven Seagal. The video, paired with anonymous uploads of Ayla's original, horrifying emergency call audio, created a perfect storm. By morning, #Justice for Ayla was trending nationally. The story had everything: a vulnerable victim, a clear-cut villain in a position of authority, and a celebrity father seeking justice. News vans descended on Oak Harbor. Protesters, initially just a handful of outraged locals, began to gather outside the police department, their numbers swelling by the hour. Their signs were simple and powerful: "A badge is not a license to brutalize, we hear you, Ayla." The Oak Harbor Police Department, caught completely off guard, went into a state of siege. Officer Mason was hastily placed on administrative leave, a move that did nothing to quell the public's fury. The official statement was a weak offering of, "We are investigating the incident," which was immediately derided online as a standard stall tactic. The story was no longer just about a cop and a kid. It had become a flashpoint in a much larger conversation about police brutality and accountability. Seagal, by confronting Mason so publicly, hadn't just sought personal vengeance, he had thrown a lit match into a powder keg of public frustration, and the resulting explosion was illuminating the deep cracks in the system. Seagal had no intention of letting the fire die down. The following day, he walked into the Oak Harbor Police Department, flanked by 2 stone-faced lawyers from a top civil rights firm. He didn't request a meeting, he commanded one. He was ushered into the office of Police Chief Miller, a man with a politician's smile and the weary eyes of someone who had buried too many skeletons. "Mr. Seagal," Miller began, his hands steepled on his desk. "I want to assure you, a full and impartial internal investigation into Officer Mason's conduct is underway." Seagal didn't sit. He placed a thick file on Miller's desk. "This isn't about one investigation, Chief. This is about a pattern." Miller opened the folder. Inside were meticulously documented records of 3 prior excessive force complaints against Mason, all of which had been dismissed with a simple, unfounded stamp. 2 of them involved minors. Miller's smile vanished. "This is privileged information." "It's evidence," Seagal corrected, his voice like ice. "Evidence that you and your department have cultivated a predator. You didn't fire him. You didn't retrain him. You protected him. You put him back on the street where he could find my daughter." He leaned forward, his hands flat on Miller's desk. "Administrative leave isn't justice. It's a paid vacation. You have 24 hours to announce his termination and recommend criminal charges to the DA. If you don't, this folder, along with a dozen others just like it, goes directly to the Department of Justice and every major news outlet in the country." The message was unequivocal. This was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. The 24-hour deadline passed. Chief Miller issued a statement announcing Mason's termination but stopped short of recommending criminal charges, citing the ongoing internal review. It was a calculated, bureaucratic half-measure, designed to appease the public while protecting the system. For Seagal, it was a declaration of war. He knew that taking down one officer wouldn't cure the disease. A corrupt system, left intact, would simply produce another Officer Mason. That afternoon, he held his own press conference, not on the steps of the police department, but in a community center in Ayla's neighborhood. With his lead attorney by his side, he announced the formation of a new, national organization, Fighters for Institutional Safety and Truth, or FIST. "This is no longer just about my daughter," Seagal announced to a throng of reporters and community members. "It is about every child, every person, who has been silenced by fear and failed by the system designed to protect them." He explained FIST's mission, a privately funded, rapid response strike force of civil rights lawyers, retired detectives, and forensic analysts. Their goal was not just to sue departments after the fact, but to proactively investigate patterns of abuse, provide legal protection for whistleblowers, and arm communities with the knowledge and resources to hold their own law enforcement accountable. "We will be the light in the places they want to keep dark," Seagal declared. "We will be the voice for the voiceless." The fight for Ayla has become a fight for everyone. The launch of FIST was a direct challenge to the established order, and the system, as always, pushed back. The pushback wasn't public, it was insidious, a campaign of whispers and bureaucratic roadblocks. Anonymous sources within police unions began feeding stories to friendly media outlets, painting Seagal as a vengeful celebrity using his wealth to wage a personal vendetta. They portrayed him as unstable, a Hollywood hothead interfering with legitimate police work. Then, the attacks became more direct. Seagal, driving from a FIST strategy meeting, was pulled over for a minor, almost non-existent traffic violation. The encounter was a masterclass in passive-aggressive intimidation. Two officers took nearly an hour to write a simple ticket, running his plates repeatedly, asking intrusive questions, their smirks just barely concealed. It was a clear message: "We see you, and we can touch you whenever we want." A few days later, a more serious move was made. Seagal was served with a formal notice of a preliminary investigation against him for assault and intimidation, stemming from the diner confrontation with Officer Mason. It was a baseless, retaliatory charge designed to mire him in legal battles, drain his resources, and discredit him as the head of FIST. His lawyers assured him it would be thrown out, but the message was a chilling one. They weren't just defending Mason anymore, they were actively targeting Seagal. He sat in his study that night, looking at the legal papers, his face grim. He knew this was part of the game. They had shown their hand. They believed they could intimidate him into silence. They had profoundly misjudged their opponent. The legal harassment and media smears failed to slow Seagal's momentum. FIST's hotline was flooded with tips and stories from across the country, building a massive, damning database of systemic abuse. The pressure on the Oak Harbor DA to press criminal charges against Mason was becoming immense. Seeing their conventional tactics failing, the unseen forces protecting Mason escalated to a new, unforgivable low. One evening, an encrypted email arrived on Seagal's personal server. There was no text, only a single, silent video file. He played it. The footage was clearly from a high-powered drone, hovering silently over the playground of Ayla's elementary school during recess. The camera zoomed in, finding Ayla as she sat drawing in her sketchbook, her friends playing nearby. Then, the camera panned slightly to a man standing near the school fence, partially obscured by a tree. His face was blurred, but his posture was observant, his hands in his pockets. He was watching her. The clip lasted only 30 seconds, then ended. It was the ultimate violation. The message was no longer a warning shot, it was a direct threat aimed at the one person Seagal was fighting to protect. The cold fury he had felt in the moments after the assault returned, but this time it was different. It was absolute. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had threatened his child to silence him. Now, he wouldn't just expose them. He would dismantle their entire world, piece by piece, and he would do it in the full, unforgiving light of day. The threat against Ayla was the final catalyst. Seagal's strategic patience evaporated, replaced by a swift, overwhelming offensive. Within 48 hours, he called a massive, emergency press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse in Los Angeles. Every major news network was there, helicopters hovering overhead. He stepped to the podium, his face like carved granite. For the past several weeks, we have pursued justice for my daughter through legal and community channels, he began, his voice amplified across the packed plaza. In response, the system we have challenged has tried to intimidate me, smear my name, and threaten my family. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. They thought they could scare us into silence. Today, we will show them what happens when you threaten a father's child. He gestured to a massive LED screen set up behind him. They tried to tell you the assault on my daughter was an isolated incident by one bad apple. We are here today to prove that it is the symptom of a rotten orchard. With that, he signaled to his team. What you are about to see, he announced, is the truth they tried to bury. The screen lit up. It wasn't just the drone footage of the man watching Ayla's school, which played first to gasps from the crowd. It was a full-scale data dump. Memos from the Oak Harbor PD detailing the cover-up of Mason's prior offenses. Bodycam footage from other officers in similar, previously unreleased incidents. And then, the screen filled with statistics, maps, and anonymized but verified case files from the FIST database, over 30,000 submissions from across the country, showing clear patterns of abuse, racial bias, and lack of accountability in specific precincts. Reporters frantically typed, their faces a mixture of shock and professional excitement. It was the biggest data leak on police misconduct in history. Seagal had just bypassed the courts and the politicians and taken his case directly to the court of public opinion, armed with an arsenal of irrefutable proof. We will no longer ask for change, Seagal concluded, his eyes burning with righteous fire. We are now, all of us, demanding it. It was a checkmate. The system, exposed and disgraced, had nowhere left to hide. The data dump from Seagal's press conference triggered a political and legal firestorm. The U.S. Department of Justice immediately announced a full-scale federal investigation into the Oak Harbor Police Department and several other precincts implicated by the FIST data. Chief Miller of Oak Harbor resigned within hours. For Officer Mason, the end was swift. Faced with overwhelming federal pressure and irrefutable evidence, the local DA pressed forward with a slew of felony charges. The trial was short. The video of the assault on Ayla, the audio from her emergency call, and the testimony of other victims he had brutalized left no room for doubt. He was found guilty on all counts and given a lengthy prison sentence, the judge making a point to condemn his cowardly and sociopathic abuse of authority. But Seagal's victory was larger than one man's conviction. The FIST Initiative, now a nationally recognized and feared watchdog organization, began working with federal reformers to draft new legislation on police accountability, transparency, and training. The case of Ayla Seagal became a landmark, a turning point cited in police academies and law schools. The quiet little girl from Oak Harbor, armed with a sketchbook and a phone, had, with the help of her father, started a revolution. Her pain had been transformed into a national movement, her voice amplified into a roar for justice that could no longer be ignored. Months later, Ayla's arm had healed, leaving only a faint scar, a physical reminder of a battle won. The FIST Initiative, under the guidance of a board Seagal had appointed, was now a self-sustaining force for change. One sunny afternoon, Seagal walked into the art therapy wing of the new Oak Harbor Community Center, funded by a settlement from the city. He found Ayla not as a patient, but as a volunteer. She sat with a group of younger children, some of whom were also survivors of trauma, guiding them, teaching them to express their stories not with words, but with color and lines. On the wall behind them was a large mural they had painted together, a vibrant, powerful image of a small girl holding up a shield against a dark, shadowy figure. Ayla looked up and saw her father watching, a proud, gentle smile on his face. She had found her own way to fight back, her own form of strength. The sketchbook she had dropped on that terrible day had become her greatest weapon. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about healing the innocent and creating something new and beautiful from the ashes of pain. Ayla's paintbrush became as mighty as any sword, a testament to the fact that strength takes many forms. Her courage, amplified by her father's resolve, sparked a movement that proves one voice, no matter how small, can change the world when it dares to speak the truth. What does true courage look like to you? Have you ever seen a small act of bravery create a powerful ripple effect? We invite you to share your stories in the comments below. Show your respect for the quiet heroes who inspire change every day. If this story of resilience and justice moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful narratives.